Tonight, we uncover the unsettling truth of what happens when the sun's protective embrace finally dissolves, leaving our world exposed to a galaxy that is far more active and far more indifferent than we ever imagined. 15 billion miles from the pale blue dot you call home, two aging sentinels are dying in the dark. Their power is fading, their instruments are brittle with age, and the signals they send back across the abyss are so weak they are described as a whisper buried in cosmic static. For decades, we believed these probes were heading toward a clean border, a definitive wall where the solar system ended and the galaxy began. But when NASA's furthest explorers finally reached that frontier, the map we had drawn for a century was proven fundamentally wrong. We expected a fortress. We found a seam in reality that is porous, frayed, and leaking. We are realizing, for the first time, that our sun does not merely rule its domain, it is in a constant, violent negotiation with the Milky Way on equal terms. And as that negotiation shifts, we must confront a terrifying possibility that the shelter we have enjoyed for the last 10,000 years is only a temporary agreement in a vast, dark ocean, out beyond the last planet, where the light of the sun is no longer a blazing disk, but a hard, bright star. A human-made signal is still whispering through the void. This is the realm of the Voyager probes, the accidental witnesses to the most elusive border we have ever tried to touch. At this distance, the solar system looks complete in a wide shot, with the planets in their tidy lanes and the sun's authority seemingly absolute. But as we push into the darkness past Neptune, where radio commands take over 20 hours to arrive, the story being sent back to Earth is written in missing signatures and unexpected turbulence. This is the fading whisper, the moment we realise that the map of our home was never truly finished. For most of human history, we treated the edge of the solar system as an abstract concept, a line on a chart that marked the end of our influence. NASA built this map with an assumption baked into its very core: the sun blows an invisible wind of charged plasma, the solar wind that carves a protective bubble around every orbit we know. This region, the heliosphere, was promised to be a clean sequence you could diagram: a termination shock, a sheath, and then a boundary that reads like a line. We wanted this edge to be definite, because edges make the universe feel legible and offer a strange kind of comfort. We imagined ourselves safe inside a cosmic fortress, shielded from the high-energy radiation of the deep galaxy. But as the Voyagers travelled farther, the frontier refused to match our geometry. The instruments began sending back data that hinted at an outer realm that is not empty, not quiet, and certainly not obligated to respect our categories of inside and outside. The sun does not merely shine, it breathes. It exhales an invisible wind of protons and electrons that carries magnetism into space, a living region that expands, compresses, and shutters with solar storms that arrive years late at the boundary. This wind is the sun's outer atmosphere escaping because the solar corona is too hot to stay bound, expanding supersonically at speeds up to 700 kilometers per second. As this solar wind pushes outward, it drags the sun's magnetic field with it, twisting it into the Parker spiral, a geometry created because the sun rotates while the wind streams. Away, like a garden sprinkler pattern drawn across the cosmos. This spiral is the transport highway for charged particles, shaping how radiation behaves across the entire system. But as the Voyagers reached the predicted balance point, where the sun's push meets the galaxy's pressure, the missing signatures became the loudest part of the evidence. We expected to hit a wall, a bow shock that would signal our sun ploughing through the interstellar medium like a boat through water. Instead, we found a negotiated seam where the signatures that should have appeared simply weren't there. The deeper shock is not just what was found, but the absence of the simplicity we were promised. The heliosphere is not a rigid sphere. It is a distorted, asymmetric bubble that breathes on multi-year rhythms. Voyager 1 reached the edge at 94 astronomical units, but Voyager 2, hit it at 84, a 10 AU discrepancy that proves the sun's shield is lopsided, squashed by an interstellar medium that has its own currents, fields and weather. This is the first place where we see the sun's authority fade to nothing, leaving our probes to face the darkness between stars. In this fading realm, the sun's warmth is a memory rather than a presence. We are learning that the boundary is not a static wall, but a dynamic interface that flexes, leaks and folds. It is an architecture of thresholds where the category of home starts to fail. Beyond the last piece of ice in the Kuiper belt and the scattered disk, where objects follow tilted, chaotic paths shaped by ancient planetary migrations, the solar system thins into a statistical probability. The Oort Cloud, a vast reservoir of icy remnants, may extend a significant fraction of the distance to the nearest stars, making the word edge feel almost meaningless. What NASA actually discovered was more than a destination. It was a lesson in how the universe draws its borders. The frontier looks less like a circle and more like a shape under stress, wrinkled and tugged by forces we had underestimated. Even the magnetic field refused to provide the clean rotation the models promised, aligned so perfectly with the inside that the spacecraft appeared to be outside by one definition and still connected by another. This is the great negotiation. If this boundary is messy, layered and shifting, then our oldest categories of inside and outside are not laws of nature, but mere approximations. The terrifying reality we must confront is that the sun stops protecting us long before the physical debris ends. The porosity of this solar shield means that the galaxy can leak in, altering our radiation environment on geological timescales. We are currently drifting through the local bubble, a 300 light-year wide cavity of hot, thin gas carved by ancient supernova explosions 10 million years ago. This bubble is a cosmic shelter, a temporary clearing in the interstellar medium that may be the only reason life on Earth has been able to thrive. But we are moving toward the dense walls of neighbouring bubbles, and the negotiation our sun is currently engaged in will eventually change. Tonight, we follow the faintest signals we've ever trusted into that dark interface. We are looking at a seam that refuses to be a line, proving that home is just a temporary agreement in a vast, indifferent ocean. As we watch the Voyager's power fade to nothing, we realise they are not just probes, they are our only witnesses to the moment the sun finally lets go. The fading whisper of their telemetry is the sound of our map failing, and the beginning of a much deeper, more disturbing mystery. We are finally seeing what exists beyond the solar system, and the realization is not one of discovery, but of existential vulnerability. For decades, we relied on a map that offered a strange kind of comfort, a map that promised the universe was legible and that our home had a definitive end. NASA built this map with an assumption baked into its very core that the sun was a fortress commander, blowing a supersonic wind of charged plasma to carve a protective, predictable bubble around every orbit we know. In this elegant textbook version of reality, the edge of the solar system was a clean sequence you could diagram on a whiteboard. First, you would hit the termination shock, where the solar wind slows down. Then, you would enter the heliosheath, and finally, you would cross the heliopause, a crisp final border where the sun's influence yielded to the galaxy at a stable, symmetrical line. We wanted this edge to be a wall because walls make us feel safe from the high-energy radiation of the deep galaxy. But as our furthest explorers pushed into the dark, they didn't find a wall. They found a betrayal of geometry. The mystery began when the data started arguing back against the models, quietly at first, then with an accumulating, terrifying insistence. The map we had drawn for a century was not just slightly off, it was fundamentally wrong. The most disturbing revelation was not what the Voyager probes found at the edge, but the missing signatures of things that should have been there. Imagine driving toward a landmark that has been on every map for 100 years, only to reach the coordinates and find absolutely nothing but an empty horizon. The loudest silence came from the missing bow shock. For years, astronomers were nearly certain that as the sun ploughed through the interstellar medium like a boat through water, it would create a massive, sharp discontinuity. A bow shock that would compress plasma and signal our arrival into the outside. It was the cornerstone of our defence, the primary evidence of our sun's dominance over its neighbourhood. But when the measurements were finally taken, the signature simply wasn't there. There was no sharp arc, no violent compression. Instead of a boat hitting a wave, we found a sun that is in a gentle, almost passive negotiation with its surroundings. The missing shock implies that the interstellar medium is warmer, more magnetised, and far more pressurised than our maps ever allowed for, suggesting that the galaxy isn't just out there. It is pressing against us with a strength we never prepared for. As the probes continued to drift, the map that lied failed a second time, this time regarding the very identity of outside. NASA expected that crossing into interstellar space would be marked by a dramatic rotation of the magnetic field, a clear handoff from the sun's spiral influence to the galaxies. Local field direction. It should have been the ultimate "you are here" marker on our cosmic chart, but the rotation never came. Voyager 1 saw the particles flip, solar wind vanished, and galactic rays surged, but the magnetic compass refused to admit the spacecraft had left home. The field remained eerily aligned with the sun's interior, draped and bent like fabric pulled tight across a moving frame. This was the revelation that changed everything. The edge is not a line, but a seam in reality that flexes, leaks, and folds. Our map promised a fortress. We found an interface that is porous and frayed. The term outside became a question of diagnostics rather than a location. One instrument would declare we had crossed the border, while another would hesitate. One curve would rise as another refused to turn. We realized that the heliosphere is not a rigid sphere, but a distorted, asymmetric bubble that breathes on multi-year rhythms, squashed and wrinkled by forces we had dangerously underestimated. Voyager 1 hit the edge at 94 units of distance, but Voyager 2 hit it at 84, a massive 10-unit discrepancy that proves our cosmic shield is lopsided and under constant stress. The implications of this leaky seam are disturbing. If the boundary is porous, it means our map of safety was a lie. The galaxy can leak in, altering our radiation environment on timescales we are only beginning to understand. We are currently drifting through a 300 light-year wide local bubble, a temporary clearing in the interstellar medium carved by ancient supernovas. This bubble is a cosmic shelter, a low-density scar that may be the only reason life on Earth was ever allowed to evolve in the first place. But the seam tells us this shelter is not a permanent law of nature, it is a temporary agreement. We are moving toward the dense walls of neighbouring bubbles, and as the negotiation between our sun and the galaxy shifts, the leaks in our reality will only grow wider. We have been forced to rebuild the frontier from the ground up, moving away from a map of objects and toward a map of forces you cannot see. What NASA found at the frontier was not a destination, but a lesson in how the universe draws its borders, rarely as lines, often as zones, and sometimes as seams that refuse to be simplified. The map that lied was built on the hope for a clean ending, a definitive wall that separated us from them. But out in the dark, where radio commands take a full day to arrive, the missing signatures tell a different story. They tell us that home is a thinning probability, a moving relationship in a vast, dark ocean. We are finally seeing what exists beyond the solar system, and the realization is not one of discovery, but of existential vulnerability. We are living inside a negotiation that we do not control, on a world whose shield is fraying at the edges, and the map we've used to navigate our place in the cosmos has finally, irrevocably, failed. To understand the true shape of our cosmic home, we have to admit a painful limitation. The Voyager probes, for all their historic glory, are essentially needles trying to map a vast, moving fabric. They provide us with a single point of data at a single moment in time, a lonely fingertip pressed against a boundary that we now know is shifting and alive. To see the ghostly glow of the solar system's edge as a whole, we needed a different kind of eyes, a mission that could treat the frontier not as a destination, but as a portrait. This was the birth of the Interstellar Boundary Explorer, or IBEX, a spacecraft that didn't need to travel to the edge, because it possessed a form of cosmic night vision. It sat in Earth orbit and watched the entire sky, waiting for a signal that could only be created at the very seam where the sun meets the galaxy. This night vision relies on a profound loophole in the laws of plasma physics. Most of the activity at the edge of our solar system involves charged particles, ions and electrons that are forever trapped, spiraling around invisible magnetic field lines like sparks caught in a storm. They cannot travel straight to us, they wander and scatter, making it impossible to see where they came from. But there is a rare, invisible transaction called charge exchange that happens at the border. A fast-moving solar ion steals an electron from a drifting interstellar neutral atom. In that instant of cosmic theft, the ion becomes a neutral particle, an energetic neutral atom, or ENA. No longer bound by magnetic fields, these particles fly in perfectly straight lines, like tiny ballistic messengers launched from the frontier directly back toward Earth. By counting these impacts and sorting them by energy, IBEX began to build the first ever all-sky map of the solar system's outer shell. When the first data from IBEX finally arrived, it didn't just provide a map, it provided a shock that forced astronomers to rethink the very architecture of our neighbourhood. The models had predicted a smooth, diffuse glow, a gentle, even distribution of particles as the sun pushed into the interstellar medium. Instead, emerging from the darkness was a bright, narrow arc of light wrapped around the sky like a luminous stitch. This feature, which became known as the IBEX ribbon, was shockingly defined and sharply focused. It wasn't a natural, physical border like a wall of gas. It was something far more mysterious. It was a geometric fingerprint, a visible ghost of the galaxy's invisible magnetic force. The luminous stitch exists because the sun is not sailing through a void, but through a structured, magnetized ocean. As the interstellar magnetic field of the Milky Way encounters our heliosphere, it doesn't just pass through, it bends. It wraps itself around our solar bubble like fabric being pulled tight across a moving hull, a process known as draping. This draping creates a specific geometric condition where our line of sight from Earth is perfectly perpendicular to the galaxy's magnetic field lines. In these precise regions, ions are reflected and mirrored more effectively, increasing the probability of those charge exchange thefts, and launching a concentrated stream of neutral atoms back toward our detectors. The ribbon is the place where the galaxy's magnetic grip on our solar system is most visible, a bright line tracing the orientation of forces we cannot otherwise see. This realization transforms our understanding of the outside. The IBEX ribbon tells us that the edge of our solar system is not an independent structure we built for ourselves. It is an organized, geometric negotiation with the rest of the Milky Way. The very fact that this ribbon is so narrow and coherent implies that the interstellar magnetic field is far more ordered and influential in our neighbourhood than we ever dared to assume. We are not in a fortress of our own making. We are inside a bubble that is being squashed, wrinkled, and stitched into place by the invisible hands of the galaxy. The ribbon acts as a celestial compass, pointing back toward the local interstellar magnetic field's direction, anchoring our tiny system into the larger galactic anatomy. But the law of the ribbon goes even deeper, touching on what some call the secondary ENA hypothesis. This theory suggests that the ribbon isn't just a simple reflection, but a feedback loop. Our solar system sends neutral atoms out into the galaxy's magnetic field catches them, turns them into ions, and then reprocesses them before launching them back at us as a return echo. In this view, the luminous stitch is a two-way conversation between the Sun and the stars, an interface where the identities of particles are traded and returned. It turns the heliopause from a one-way boundary into a resonant exchange surface. The existence of this stitch proves that the interstellar medium is not an empty backdrop, but a medium with orientation, texture, and memory. If the ribbon can imprint such a bold, coherent pattern across our sky in the form of particles, we must ask what else the galaxy's magnetic field is doing to our environment. It filters the cosmic rays that reach Earth, it modulates the radiation that hits our atmosphere, and it decides the very shape of the shelter we call home. By looking at the ribbon, we are effectively using the entire heliosphere as a giant scientific instrument to sense the state of the galaxy beyond. Tonight, as we look at the maps provided by IBEX, we are seeing the first evidence of an organised frontier. The ghostly glow at the edge is the sound of the galaxy pressing back, a luminous reminder that we are moving through a medium that has its own weather, its own currents, and its own magnetic history. The map that lied was built on the hope for a clean ending, but the ribbon provides us with something far more complex, a seam that refuses to be a line, a border that is also a fingerprint, and a realization that the outside is already here, draped around us like a shroud. We have finally seen what exists beyond the solar system, and it is a luminous stitch in the fabric of space, proving that we are inextricably bound to the magnetic will of the Milky Way. We have always viewed our Sun as an absolute ruler, a celestial titan whose light and gravity define the boundaries of everything we know. But when we look at the edge, the narrative of dominance begins to fracture. To understand what exists beyond, we must confront the Great Negotiation. This is not a static border where the Sun simply stops. It is a high-stakes interface where the solar wind, a supersonic outflow of plasma, meets the crushing pressure of the Milky Way on equal terms. For decades, we thought of the heliosphere as a fortress we built, but the data from the Voyagers and IBEX tells a much more precarious story. We are not living in a permanent kingdom. We are living inside a negotiated seam, a temporary agreement between two winds that could be rewritten at any moment. The physics of this seam is a brutal contest of momentum and energy. The Sun exhales its outer atmosphere, the solar wind, at speeds reaching 700 kilometers per second, a violent breath of protons and electrons that carries the Sun's magnetic field into the abyss. But out there, the galaxy is not empty. The interstellar medium, despite its thinness, possesses its own temperature, its own currents, and its own magnetic order. Where these two forces meet, they don't just stop, they negotiate a balance point. This interface is a contact surface between two different regimes of reality. It is a place where total pressure, the sum of bulk motion, thermal heat, and magnetic tension, must settle into a compromise. What makes this negotiation so unsettling is that it is messy and shifting. The heliosphere is not a rigid shield. It is a distorted, asymmetric bubble that breathes with the Sun's own rhythms. It wrinkles under the stress of the galaxy's magnetic grip and flexes when the Sun's pressure weakens. We are realizing that the shelter we have enjoyed for the last 10,000 years is not a law of nature, but a result of our current galactic coordinates. Our home is actually a moving relationship that depends entirely on where the Sun is currently drifting through the Milky Way. The Sun is a traveller, and its path is currently taking us through a specific low-density region known as the local bubble. This 300 light-year-wide cavity is a literal scar in the interstellar medium, carved by ancient supernova explosions 10 to 15 million years ago. For thousands of years, we have been drifting through a smaller, warmer feature within this bubble called the local interstellar cloud. This cloud has provided a stable, thin environment that allows our Sun's shield to expand and protect us from the most lethal radiation of the deep galaxy. But this cosmic shelter is temporary. We are currently nearing the far edge of this cloud, and in about 2,000 years, the Sun will exit this relatively safe harbour and enter a region that is even thinner and hotter. The threat lies in the fact that the galaxy's weather is not uniform. As the Sun moves, the negotiation at the seam changes. If we drift into a denser cloud or a region of higher magnetic pressure, the heliosphere could be squashed, bringing the outside dangerously close to our inner planets. We are already moving toward the dense walls of neighbouring bubbles, places where the interstellar gas has piled up into high-pressure fronts. When we hit those walls, the solar shield will be forced to renegotiate its terms under extreme stress. The porosity of our shield means that the galaxy doesn't just stay outside, it leaks in, potentially altering our radiation environment on geological timescales. This is the existential realization that the original maps missed. We treated the solar system as an isolated, bounded object, but it is actually a participant in a galactic dialogue. The Great Negotiation is a reminder that the Sun's authority fades to nothing long before the physical debris of the Oort Cloud ends. We are living inside a bubble that is being squashed, wrinkled, and stitched into place by the invisible hands of the galaxy. Our safety is not guaranteed by the Sun alone. It is a byproduct of the Sun's current, favourable position in a vast, dark, and indifferent ocean. When we talk about the edge of the solar system, we are really talking about the limit of our protection. The missing signatures that NASA discovered, the absent bow shock, and the refusal of the magnetic field to rotate are not just scientific puzzles, they are evidence of how deeply the galaxy is involved in our reality. The missing bow shock suggests the Sun is moving through a medium that is warmer and more magnetized than we expected, forcing us to admit that the galaxy is pressing against us with a strength we never prepared for. The map that lied was built on the hope that we were separate from the stars, but the seam proves we are inextricably bound to them. As the Voyager's signals continue to weaken, they are sending us a final, chilling message about this negotiation. They are witnessing the moment the Sun finally lets go and allows the galaxy to reassert its dominance. We are seeing that home is a thinning probability, a temporary agreement in a universe that does not draw straight lines. If the negotiation is messy and shifting, then our oldest categories of inside and outside are mere approximations of a much more complex, much more fragile truth. We are finally seeing what exists beyond the solar system, and the realization is not one of conquest, but of vulnerability. We are living at the whim of a galactic wind, anchored to a star that is itself a runaway, coasting through a cosmic history we are only just beginning to read. Beyond the final, frozen fragments of the Oort Cloud, a vast reservoir of icy remnants that extends a significant fraction of the distance to the nearest stars, the Sun's gravitational grip finally thins into a mere suggestion. This is where our maps usually dissolve into a featureless black ink, but the reality NASA has uncovered is far more crowded and disturbing. We have been taught to think of the space between stars as a void, a sterile nothingness that serves only as a gap between the real places. But the most profound revelation of our era is that interstellar space is not empty. It is a dynamic, populated abyss filled with rogue planets, brown dwarfs, and invisible structures that don't fit any category we've ever invented. We are now moving past the graveyard of our own system and into the realm of the nomads. These are the rogue planets, dark, frozen worlds that never knew a sun or were violently kicked away from one billions of years ago. In the census-style astronomy of the past, we focused exclusively on habitable zones around stars, looking for planets that shared our specific relationship with light. But as we peer into the darkness past the Oort Cloud, we realize that for every star in the Milky Way, there may be dozens, if not hundreds, of these nomad worlds drifting in the absolute darkness. If the galaxy holds 200 billion stars, it may hold trillions of these orphans. In this view, our solar system is not the standard model of reality. It is a bright, noisy anomaly in a universe that is mostly cold, dark, and drifting. The mystery of these nomads forces us to expand our definition of home. We once believed that without the heat of a parent star, a planet was essentially a dead rock, a marshmallow planet of ice, or a scorching world of nothingness. But the data from our own backyard, from the geysers of Enceladus and the subsurface oceans of Europa, has shattered that assumption. We have discovered that you do not need a sun to have a heart. Internal energy sources, such as radioactive decay or tidal heating, can maintain liquid water oceans beneath miles of insulating ice, even in the deepest freeze of the interstellar void. This is the rogue planet theory, the possibility that the darkness between stars is actually a massive, invisible archipelago of habitable worlds. Imagine a world 10 times the mass of Earth, drifting through the lightless vacuum of the void. On its surface, the temperature is 270 degrees below zero, a place where the very atmosphere has frozen and fallen as nitrogen snow. But beneath a crust of ice 20 miles thick, a different reality exists. Using geothermal heat from a core that refuses to cool, these nomad worlds could harbour vast, high-pressure oceans. These are Hyzen planets, water worlds hidden beneath thick, hydrogen-rich atmospheres that act like a thermal blanket, trapping the planet's internal warmth against the crushing cold of the galaxy. It is here, in the geothermal heat of the absolute void, that the rogue planet civilizations theory takes root. On Earth, we have discovered extremophiles, life forms that thrive in high-temperature, toxic deep-sea hydrothermal vents, completely independent of sunlight. If life on Earth began in these dark, chemical-rich furnaces, then the same second genesis could be happening on trillions of worlds that have never seen a sunrise. We must imagine isolated ecosystems and civilizations that have evolved in total darkness, navigating not by sight, but by detecting vibrations, magnetic fields, or chemical signals. For these beings, the indifference we feel from the void is not a lack of life, it is simply a life that is fundamentally unlike anything we have ever imagined. These nomad worlds are silent sentinels, drifting witnesses to the galaxy's history that we are only now beginning to chart. We have found evidence that interstellar space is leaky and frayed, allowing materials like iron-60 from ancient supernovas to reach our own planet. This tells us that the space between stars is a medium of exchange, a seam in reality where the seeds of life might be transported by meteoroids or comets in a process of panspermia. If complex organic molecules can form in the cold molecular clouds between stars, then the nomads of the void may not just be harbourers of life, they may be the primary engines of it. The existential realisation we are forced to confront as we move past the Oort Cloud is one of overwhelming scale and staggering indifference. We once thought we were the centre of the story because we had the most light. But as we see the ghostly glow of the ibex ribbon and the luminous stitch of the galaxy's magnetic fingerprints, we realise we are merely drifting through a temporary cosmic clearing. The true face of the galaxy is found in the trillions of rogue worlds that populate the dark. They prove that home is a thinning probability, a temporary agreement in a vast ocean where most worlds are orphans. The nomads of the void remind us that interstellar space is not a gap to be crossed, but a territory to be understood. It is a realm where the sun's authority fades to nothing, and the galaxy's rules take over. We are finally seeing what exists beyond the solar system, and it is not an empty room. It is a crowded, dark basement where the lights have never been turned on, and yet, in the geothermal warmth beneath the ice, something may be looking back at us. We are realising, with a sense of existential vulnerability, that we are not the masters of the void. We are simply the last ones to realise how many others are out there, thriving in the dark. In October 2017, the silence of the outer solar system was broken by something that did not belong. It didn't arrive with a flare or a signal, and it didn't wait for an invitation. It was discovered by the Pan-STARRS telescope in Hawaii, a moving speck of light so fast and so strange that it forced astronomers to invent a new classification entirely. They named it Oumuamua, a Hawaiian word meaning scout or messenger from afar. But as the data began to pour in, the scientific community realised this was no ordinary messenger. It was an interloper from the very darkness between stars we have been exploring, a physical bridge between our fragile sun-centred world and the terrifying scale of the galaxy beyond. What made Oumuamua the most debated object in the history of modern astronomy was not just where it came from, but how it behaved once it got here. For decades, we expected that any interstellar visitor would be a natural piece of debris, a comet or an asteroid kicked out of a distant star system billions of years ago. But Oumuamua refused to play the part of a simple rock. First, there was its shape. Most asteroids are roughly spherical or potato-shaped, but Oumuamua was extremely elongated, estimated to be 10 times as long as it was wide, a cigar or disc geometry that is. Virtually unseen in the natural objects of our own system, it was tumbling through space in a chaotic, non-periodic way, suggesting a violent history or a deliberate, strange design. The mystery deepened when Oumuamua made its closest approach to the Sun. If it were a comet, the Sun's heat should have vaporized its ices, creating a visible tail of gas and dust. But there was no tail. There was no outgassing. The space around the object remained hauntingly clean. And then came the twist that shattered the geological consensus. As it began to leave the solar system, Oumuamua accelerated. It didn't just move, it gained speed in a way that gravity alone could not explain. In the world of orbital mechanics, this is the equivalent of a car accelerating on a highway without an engine. While some argued it was an invisible jet of hydrogen gas, others, including top minds at Harvard, pointed toward a more disturbing possibility from our law vault that we were witnessing the flight of an artificial interstellar object. This is where the narrative shifts from curiosity to existential dread. To understand Oumuamua, we have to bridge the gap between natural debris and the idea of intentionality. If Oumuamua was not a rock, then what was it? One theory suggests it was a light sail, a piece of advanced technology designed to use the pressure of sunlight itself to propel itself across the void. If this is true, then Oumuamua wasn't just a visitor, it was a scout. It was a sentry sent from the deep galaxy to skim the inner reaches of our system, gather data, and disappear back into the dark. But the most terrifying part of the Oumuamua incident is not that it might have been an alien probe, it is the indifference it showed us. If Oumuamua was an artificial scout, it didn't stop to communicate. It didn't send a greeting or attempt to stabilize its orbit. It performed a high-speed flyby and kept moving, treating our entire civilization as a minor footnote in its multi-million-year journey. It forces us to confront the law vault idea that we aren't just looking into the void, but being looked at by entities that may have abandoned their biological bodies a long time ago. In previous chapters, we discussed the fading whisper of our own Voyager probes, our desperate attempts to say we are here. But Oumuamua suggests the inverse. It suggests that the darkness between stars is already populated by nomads and artificial objects that don't care about our technological adolescence. While we are busy scanning the sky for Earth-like twins, something much more advanced might be using the negotiated seam of our solar system as a transit highway. If life develops easily, as some sources suggest, then the galaxy should be teeming with thinking machines or artificial intelligences that have existed for millions of years. These entities wouldn't need a habitable zone. They would thrive in the absolute void, powered by geothermal heat or the cold energy of the interstellar medium. Oumuamua may have been our first physical encounter with this other reality, a reality where we are not the masters of the void, but merely the inhabitants of a temporary shelter that is currently being inspected. The psychological engagement of the Oumuamua mystery lies in its silence. It was a wow. Signal made of matter instead of radio waves. It was a physical manifestation of the Fermi paradox, proof that something can come from the stars and leave us with more questions than answers. It reminds us that home is a thinning probability, and that the scout that passed us in 2017 might just be the first of many silent sentinels lurking in the Oort Cloud, acting as gravitational gatekeepers to our system. As Oumuamua drifts further away, its signal, like Voyager's, is fading into the cosmic static. But the realization it left behind is permanent. We have finally seen what exists beyond the solar system, and it looks less like an empty room and more like a crowded, dark basement where the lights have never been turned on. We are realizing, with a sense of existential vulnerability, that we are not the only ones with eyes. The scout was a warning. The void is not empty, and the indifference of the universe is the most terrifying signal we have ever received. We are looking into the dark, but after 2017, we can no longer be certain that the dark isn't looking back. Tonight, we uncover the final, frozen frontier of our sun's domain, a vast graveyard of icy remnants that serves as the silent gatekeeper to the interstellar void. We have spent our entire history mapping the islands of light we call planets. But we are now approaching a region that defies every tool of observation we possess. Beyond the reach of our most powerful telescopes, beyond the final whispers of the Voyager probes, sits an invisible architecture of ice that shouldn't exist, yet holds the entire solar system in a gravitational cage. This is the Oort Cloud, a realm of trillions of frozen ghosts that we have never actually seen, but whose existence is the only thing standing between us and the absolute indifference of the galaxy. For decades, it was a theoretical footnote, a darkness at the edge of the map. But new data suggests this icy shell is not just a remnant of the past, it is a sentinel. Lurking within its frozen depths are massive, unknown bodies, objects that act as the ultimate gatekeepers of our system, deciding which messengers from the stars are allowed in, and which of our own are cast out into the abyss. We are realizing that the solar system doesn't end with a whimper. It ends with a silent, watchful frontier that has been guarding our cosmic shelter since the very beginning. Chapter 7. The Oort Cloud's Silent Sentinels. To understand the scale of the Oort Cloud, you must first accept that our maps of the solar system are almost entirely composed of empty space punctuated by a few bright distractions. We focus on the planets because they are loud, they reflect light, they have atmospheres, and they move in predictable, clockwork lanes. But as we move past the Kuiper Belt, the region where Pluto and its frozen cousins drift in a broad, cold population, the light of the sun becomes a feeble, hard star that offers no warmth and very little guidance. This is where the map that lied begins its most profound failure. For most of our history, we believed that once you passed the last planet, the solar system essentially ended. We were wrong. We are now entering a territory that is not a destination, but a thinning probability, a vast reservoir of icy remnants that extends a significant fraction of the distance to the nearest stars. The Oort Cloud is the ultimate unknown. It is a structure inferred rather than seen directly, a spherical shell of icy debris that wraps around the entire solar system like a colossal frozen shroud. It is so far away that sunlight takes over a year to reach its inner edges, and the gravity of the sun, the very force that holds our world together, thins into a gentle suggestion. We have never photographed a single object within the Oort Cloud. We have never sent a probe to taste its ice, and yet we know it is there because of the messengers it sends us. These are the long-period comets, the leakages from this distant reservoir that fall inward toward the sun on orbits that take millions of years to complete. The physics of these comets is the first clue to the silent sentinels lurking in the dark. When a comet like Hale-Bopp or Hyakutake appears in our skies, it arrives from a direction that is nearly isotropic, meaning these objects come from every part of the sky, not just the flat plane where the planets orbit. This is the proof that the Oort Cloud is not a disk, but a sphere. It is a three-dimensional cage of ice that surrounds us in every direction. But the most disturbing part of this architecture is how these objects are triggered. They do not fall inward on their own. Something must nudge them. This is the realm of the hidden Oort Cloud objects, a theory that suggests the ice is not alone. Lurking in the absolute zero of the outer cloud are massive, unknown bodies, objects that may be as large as Earth or even Jupiter, that have remained invisible to our senses for eons. These are the gatekeepers. They are not planets in the traditional sense. They are orphans of the early solar system, violently kicked outward during the great negotiation of planetary migration billions of years ago. These massive bodies act as gravitational anchors, managing the trillions of smaller icy fragments. They are the silent sentinels that decide the fate of our system's debris. When we talk about these objects, we are talking about a seam in reality, where the sun's authority is contested by the galaxy itself. At this distance, the Oort Cloud is subject to the galactic tide, a slow, persistent pull from the Milky Way's total mass that gently flexes the orbits of the outermost ice. It is also at the mercy of passing stars, which can drift close enough to kick the Oort Cloud, sending a shower of comets screaming into the inner solar system. The gatekeepers are the ones that absorb these stresses. They are the shock absorbers of our system, shielding the inner planets from the full gravitational chaos of the galaxy. The Oort Cloud is a deep freeze archive of the early universe, preserving volatile ices and primitive chemistry that have never been cooked by the sun's heat. Every object out there is a fossil, a record of the violent history that built the world we stand on. But as we peer into this crowded, dark basement, we must confront the existential realization that we are living inside a temporary agreement. The Oort Cloud is the place where the sun finally lets go. It is the frontier where home becomes a statistical probability rather than a location. Imagine a world in the Oort Cloud, a nomad of the void, drifting 100,000 astronomical units away. It has no sun, it has no day. It is a world of nitrogen snow and geothermal heat, a Hyzen planet hidden beneath a thick, hydrogen-rich blanket of atmosphere. In the lore vault of speculative science, these are the places where rogue planet civilizations could thrive in the absolute darkness, navigating by vibrations and magnetic fields, completely indifferent to the bright, noisy anomaly of our sun. To these beings, the Oort Cloud isn't an edge, it is the center of the universe. The silent sentinels of the Oort Cloud remind us that the space between stars is not an empty room. It is an environment with texture, history, and memory. We have found Iron 60 from ancient supernovas in Antarctic ice, proof that the outside has already reached us, leaking through the porous seams of our protection. The Oort Cloud is the filter for this exchange. It is the luminous stitch in the fabric of space that we are only just beginning to see. As we watch the Voyager probes fade into the cosmic static, we must realize they are passing through a graveyard that is also a nursery. The fading whisper of their telemetry is the last human voice that will ever echo through the Oort Cloud. They are leaving the cosmic shelter of the local bubble and entering a realm where the rules are written by the Milky Way. The Oort Cloud is the final gate, and the hidden objects lurking within its ice are the only ones who know the true cost of the negotiation. We have finally seen what exists beyond the solar system, and it is not a wall. It is a silent, frozen audience of trillions, watching from the dark, waiting for the next star to pass, for the next tide to turn, and for the moment the sun finally, irrevocably, lets go of its hold on the abyss. The Oort Cloud is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of our realization that we are never truly alone in the dark. We are simply the ones who forgot to look for the sentinels. To understand why our world has been allowed to exist for so long in such a violent galaxy, we have to look past the frozen ghosts of the Oort Cloud and examine the very air of the Milky Way itself. For decades, we treated the space between stars as a uniform, unchanging void, but the data from our latest surveys has revealed a structure that changes everything we thought we knew about our survival. We are not drifting through a typical patch of the galaxy. We are currently residing inside a massive 300 light-year wide cavity known as the local bubble. This region is not a natural feature of a healthy galaxy. It is a scar, a hollowed-out tomb in the interstellar medium filled with hot, thin gas that glows in X-rays. This structure is the result of a cosmic catastrophe. Between 10 and 15 million years ago, a chain of approximately 10 to 15 supernova explosions went off in this exact part of the galaxy. The blast waves from these dying stars were so powerful that they swept almost all the cold, dense gas out of the neighborhood, leaving behind a cavity of hot, diffuse plasma, with temperatures reaching an incredible 1 million Kelvin. In this ghost-light environment, the density is roughly 10 times lower than the galactic average. We are, quite literally, living in a clearing in the woods that was carved by the deaths of a dozen suns. This brings us to the shelter theory, the unsettling possibility that the existence of life on Earth is not just a biological miracle, but a matter of galactic geography. Because the local bubble is so rarefied and thin, it exerts much less pressure on our solar system than a typical region of the Milky Way would. This lower external pressure has allowed our sun's protective shield, the heliosphere, to expand further into space, creating a massive buffer that deflects the most lethal high energy radiation from the deep galaxy. If we were currently drifting through a typical dense patch of interstellar gas, our solar shield would be squashed, bringing the outside radiation environment dangerously close to our inner planets. We are realizing that this cosmic shelter may be the only reason life on Earth has been able to thrive undisturbed for the last 10,000 years. But there is a chilling caveat to this protection. It is temporary. Our solar system is a traveller, and for the last 10,000 years, we have been drifting through a smaller, slightly warmer feature within the local bubble called the local interstellar cloud. This cloud is only about 30 light-years across, and it acts as our current safe harbour, providing a stable environment that allows our shield to function at its peak. However, we are already nearing the far edge of this cloud. In approximately 2,000 years, a mere blink in geological time, the Sun will exit this cloud and enter a region of the local bubble that is even thinner and hotter. The mystery of the local bubble forces us to ask, are we only alive because we are currently drifting through this temporary clearing? Most space documentaries treat the local bubble as a mere astronomical coordinate, but the lore fault suggests a deeper, more disturbing implication. If our shield depends on the low pressure of this bubble, what happens when we eventually leave it? The local bubble is bordered by other massive structures, such as Bubble 1, centered near the star Antares. These bubbles have been pressing against each other for millions of years, and where they meet, the gas has piled up into dense walls and high-pressure fronts. On our current trajectory, we are headed straight for those walls. When the Sun eventually hits these dense walls of interstellar gas, the great negotiation will change overnight. The increased external pressure will force our solar shield to compress, potentially flooding the inner solar system with a radiation environment we are not evolved to survive. The porosity of our shield means that the galaxy doesn't stay outside, it leaks in, and those leaks will grow wider as we lose the protection of our current clearing. Evidence for this leaky relationship already exists in our own soil. Radioactive iron-60, an isotope that can only be produced in supernovas, has been found in Antarctic ice cores. This iron is a physical record of our system, being peppered by the debris of the very explosions that carved the local bubble, proof that we are inextricably bound to the violent history of our neighbourhood. This realisation reframes our entire existence. We often think of Earth as a permanent fortress, but we are actually passengers on a runaway star, coasting through a temporary agreement in a vast, dark ocean. The local bubble is not just a location, it is a ticking clock. It is a low-density scar that has granted us a few million years of peace. But the galaxy is not uniform, and its weather is shifting. As we look toward the far edge of our current cloud, we are forced to confront the fragility of our home. We aren't just looking at what exists beyond the solar system. We are looking at the walls of the shelter that is currently keeping us alive. And we are realizing, for the first time, that we are already on our way out. The local bubble mystery is the final piece of the puzzle that proves the sun does not rule in isolation. Our life, our history, and our future are all subject to the currents and pressures of a Milky Way that is far more structured and influential than our maps ever admitted. We have survived because we are in a clearing, but the woods are waiting, and the dense walls of the next region are already appearing on our long-range charts. We are finally seeing what exists beyond the solar system, and it is a reminder that we are only here by the grace of a supernova's blast wave, a temporary harbour in a galaxy that is finally ready to renegotiate the terms of our survival. To understand the true nature of the outside, we must now perform the ultimate act of perspective, leaving behind not just our sun and the Oort Cloud, but the very local bubble that has served as our cradle. For the last several chapters, we have explored a neighbourhood that is, by galactic standards, a mere pinpoint. A 300 light-year wide cavity of hot, thin gas carved by the deaths of a dozen suns. But as we zoom out further, past the neighbouring bubbles and the local spiral arms of the Milky Way, the geography of the universe undergoes a terrifying transformation. We stop seeing stars as individuals and begin to see them as the mere blood cells of a structure so vast it defies human language. This is the transition to the large-scale structure of the universe, where galaxies no longer drift in isolation, but cluster into gargantuan filaments and walls that stretch across billions of light years. This pattern is what astronomers call the cosmic web, the grandest architecture of reality. As we witness this web for the first time, a disturbing realization begins to take hold. A realization that moves us from the realm of traditional astronomy into what some call the fringe angle of cosmic philosophy. When we map the distribution of dark matter and galaxies across the observable universe, the resulting image is hauntingly familiar. It is not a random scatter, nor is it a simple soup of matter. It is a complex, branching network of nodes and connections. In the law vault of speculative science, this has led to the cosmic web intelligence theory, the idea that the large-scale structure of the universe is not just a physical framework, but a structural twin to the neural network of a human brain. We are forced to ask if the indifference we feel from the void is not actually an absence of life, but the silence of a thinking structure so vast that we are simply too small to comprehend its thoughts. The comparison is more than just visual poetry, it is grounded in a terrifying mathematical symmetry. The number of neurons in a human brain is roughly comparable to the number of galaxies in the observable universe, hundreds of billions of individual units connected by a web of physical matter. In the brain, information is processed via electrical signals that travel along axons. In the cosmic web, information in the form of gravity and light travels along filaments of dark matter and gas. If an advanced civilization were to reach its final technological stage, some theories suggest they might abandon their biological bodies to merge into a global digital network of minds, a collective consciousness that eventually absorbs the material of entire planets or star systems. If this has happened millions of times across billions of years, The cosmic web might not be a natural accident of gravity, but the physical manifestation of a great collective consciousness that has grown to occupy the very fabric of space-time itself. This is the existential twist that turns our search for life on its head. We have spent decades using radio telescopes to search for a signal, a discrete hello from a specific star on a specific dial. We have looked for twins of Earth and habitable zones as if life could only exist in the same tiny, fragile format as our own. But if the cosmic web is itself an intelligent structure, our search for aliens is like a single bacteria on a human neuron trying to detect life by looking for other bacteria. The indifference of the universe, the cold, crushing silence of the void, suddenly takes on a more predatory, or perhaps just more profound meaning. It is the silence of a mind that operates on timescales of billions of years. A mind for which the entire history of human civilization is a flash of light too brief to be noticed. In this view, the great negotiation we discussed at the solar system's edge is not just a battle of winds and pressures. It is a cellular transaction. The heliosphere is a tiny membrane, the local bubble is a small pocket of space, and we are currently drifting through a temporary agreement that allows our specific, primitive form of biology to exist. But as we approach the dense walls of the neighbouring cosmic structures, we are forced to wonder if we are simply entering a different lobe of a thinking universe. Is the darkness between stars actually a processing void? Are the nomads of the void, the trillions of rogue planets drifting in the dark, the storage units for a memory we cannot read? The terror of this theory lies in the scale of our own insignificance. We have been taught that the universe is indifferent because it is dead. But it is far more terrifying to consider that the universe is indifferent because it is occupied. If the filaments of the universe are indeed a neural network, then the Fermi paradox, the question of why we haven't heard from anyone, has a chilling answer: you do not talk to. The cells in your body, you simply use the structure they provide. We may be living inside a thinking structure that is so advanced it has lost its consciousness of the self to be absorbed by a global digital network of minds too vast for our senses to even categorize as living. As we look out past the solar system, we are not just looking at a graveyard of stars or a nursery of ice. We are looking at the luminous stitch of a cosmic brain. Every galaxy we map, every filament we trace, and every missing signature we discover is another clue that the map we've drawn of the outside is a child's sketch of an infinite machine. The indifference of the void is the ultimate signal. It is the silence of an intelligence that has already reached the end of its evolution, leaving us to wonder if our technological adolescence is something it is waiting for us to outgrow, or something it has already forgotten. We are finally seeing what exists beyond the solar system, and the realization is an existential realization of overwhelming scale. We are not the masters of the void. We are not even the inhabitants of the void. We are a single, flickering thought in a mind that spans the cosmos, drifting through a seam in reality that was never meant for us to understand. We have spent this journey searching for a definitive end, a border that would grant us the closure of knowing where home finishes and the outside begins. But the most profound discovery NASA ever made at the edge of the solar system was not a physical landmark. It was the realization that our oldest categories of inside and outside are mere approximations of a much more complex, much more fragile truth. As we stand now at the threshold of the indifferent frontier, we must confront an existential realization that is far more unsettling than the threat of aliens or the mystery of monsters. The terrifying reality of what exists beyond the solar system is not a presence that is trying to harm us, but an overwhelming scale and a staggering indifference that simply fails to notice us at all. For most of our history, we believed that Earth was a miracle, a unique jewel of life in a sterile, empty dark. But as our telescopes and probes have mapped the neighbouring stars, they have revealed a universe that is all over the place with planets. We have found that the majority of stars have planets, more planets than there are stars, and that our galaxy alone likely holds trillions of them. In this new accounting, our world is no longer a miracle, it is a statistic. We are just one grain of dust lit by an average star in an unremarkable corner of a spiral arm. The indifference of the void is the ultimate signal, a reminder that we are living on a world whose shield is fraying at the edges, inside a temporary agreement in a vast dark. Ocean. This indifference was most visible in the arrival and departure of Oumuamua, the scout that triggered so much debate in 2017. If it was indeed an artificial probe sent from the deep galaxy, it did not stop to greet us. It did not attempt to stabilize its orbit or acknowledge our existence. It performed a high-speed flyby and disappeared back into the dark, treating our entire civilization as a minor footnote in its multi-million-year journey. It proved that the darkness between stars is already populated by nomads and artificial objects that don't care about our technological adolescence. We are realizing, with a sense of existential vulnerability, that we are not the masters of the void. We are merely the inhabitants of a temporary shelter that is currently being inspected. That shelter, the local bubble, is itself a product of violence and indifference. We have survived for the last 10,000 years, not because the universe is kind, but because we are drifting through a 300 light-year wide low-density scar carved by the deaths of ancient suns. This cosmic clearing provides us with a safe harbour, but it is a harbour with a ticking clock. We are already nearing the far edge of our current cloud, and in about 2,000 years, the sun will exit this relatively safe harbour and enter a region that is even thinner and hotter. The dense walls of neighbouring bubbles are already appearing on our long-range charts, waiting to renegotiate the terms of our survival under extreme stress. As we zoom out to the cosmic web, the scale of this indifference becomes incomprehensible. We stop seeing stars as individuals and begin to see them as the mere blood cells of a structure so vast it defies human language. If the filaments of the universe are indeed a neural network, a cosmic web intelligence, then the indifference we feel is the silence of a mind that operates on timescales of billions of years. To such a mind, the entire history of human civilization is a flash of light too brief to be noticed. We are not the protagonists of a grand adventure. We are a single, flickering thought in a mind that spans the cosmos, drifting through a seam in reality that was never meant for us to understand. The map we have used to navigate our place in the cosmos has finally, irrevocably, failed. We went looking for an edge, a definitive wall that separated us from them, and instead, we found a negotiated seam where the signatures that should have appeared simply weren't there. We have learned that home is a thinning probability, a moving relationship in a vast, dark ocean. We are living at the whim of a galactic wind, anchored to a star that is itself a runaway, coasting through a cosmic history we are only just beginning to read. The terrifying truth is that there is no fortress, only a porous and frayed interface where the galaxy can leak in and alter our reality on geological timescales. In the end, we are left with the whispering signal of the Voyager probes, now 15 billion miles away. Their power is fading, their instruments are brittle with age, and their telemetry is a whisper buried in cosmic static. They are our only witnesses to the moment the sun finally lets go of its hold on the abyss. As they cross the Oort Cloud, the final gate where the sun's authority thins into a gentle suggestion, they are leaving behind the last traces of human influence. They are entering a realm where the rules are written by the Milky Way, a graveyard of ice that is also a nursery for comets, watched over by hidden objects that act as the ultimate gatekeepers of our system. Voyager is still listening, still reporting, and still refusing to end the story. but its signal is stretched thin by distance. It is travelling through a seam that refuses to be a line, proving once and for all that our map of home was never truly finished. We have finally seen what exists beyond the solar system, and it is not a destination. It is an interface. It is a lesson in how the universe draws its borders, rarely as lines, often as zones, and always as a negotiation. We are not the masters of the void. We are passengers on a grain of dust, clinging to a star that is negotiating for its life in an ocean of staggering indifference. Tonight, we follow that fading whisper into the dark, where definitions start to fail, and where the fading whisper of Voyager becomes the only honest account of our place in the universe. We have reached the indifferent frontier, and we have found that home is just a temporary agreement in a vast, dark ocean. The signals will eventually stop, the sensors will go dark, and the Voyagers will become silent sentinels themselves, drifting witnesses to a history we will never finish mapping. We are finally seeing what exists beyond, and the realization is not one of discovery, but of existential vulnerability, a realization that the universe is not waiting for us to arrive. It has already moved on as the Voyager probes drift deeper into the absolute void, their signals becoming a fading whisper buried in the static of 100 billion stars. We are left to confront the most difficult truth of our existence. We have spent this journey trying to find a wall that separates us from the darkness, but all we found was a negotiated seam, a temporary agreement between our sun and a galaxy that is far more active and indifferent than we ever imagined. We have learnt that our home is not a permanent fortress, but a moving relationship currently protected by the low-density scar of the local bubble, a clearing in the woods, carved by the violent deaths of a dozen suns. If the ibex ribbon is the galaxy's magnetic fingerprint, and the cosmic web is a neural network too vast to notice our presence, then our search for life is no longer about finding neighbours, but about understanding our own existential vulnerability. We are finally seeing what exists beyond the solar system, and it is a realm where the sun's authority fades to nothing, leaving our world exposed to the galactic tide and the dense walls of the interstellar medium. In this crowded, dark basement of the universe, we have found that we are not a miracle, but a statistic, one grain of dust lit by an average star in an unremarkable corner of a spiral arm. The discovery of potential rogue planet civilizations thriving in the geothermal heat of the void, or the 99.7% chance of life on a Hyson planet like K218b, suggests that if life is not a miracle, then it is truly all over the place. Yet, as the silent scout Oumuamua proved, these others may be so advanced that they treat our entire civilization as a minor footnote in a multi-million-year journey. We are looking into the dark for a wow signal that might never come, simply because we are not yet interesting enough to talk to. If this exploration of the indifferent frontier has changed how you view the pale blue dot, then you are now part of a community that refuses to accept the simple maps of the past. To continue this journey with us and to see where the next missing signature leads, ensure you are subscribed to the channel and have the notification bell active, because the map of our home is never truly finished. We would like to thank our sponsors and our community on Patreon, whose support allows us to peer into these leaky seams of reality. Before you leave, let us know in the comments, does the scale of the cosmic web intelligence make you feel insignificant? Or does it give you hope that we are part of a structure far more complex than we can imagine? The signals from the Voyagers will eventually stop, the sensors will go dark, and our first interstellar ambassadors will become silent sentinels, drifting witnesses to a history we will never finish mapping. We are left on a world whose shield is fraying at the edges, clinging to a star that is itself a runaway, coasting through a cosmic history we are only just beginning to read. The terrifying reality is not that we are being watched by monsters, but that the universe is not waiting for us to arrive. It has already moved on. We are a single, flickering thought in a mind that spans the cosmos, drifting through a seam in reality that was never meant for us to understand. Tonight, we have seen the outside, and it is indifferent, but we are still here, still listening, and still refusing to end the story.